Hi guys, welcome back to this channel. In this video we are going to look at the topic the internet and the www. Okay, first of all, let's start by understanding what internet is. So the word internet comes from interconnected network. Inter and net becomes internet. And what does this mean? It means massive global system of connected networks. Now, for example, in your home you have a network, which can be a LAN or a wireless LAN. In another home, there's a network. And all these networks are communicating with one another, transferring files. So all these networks connected together, being able to communicate with one another, sharing files, is what we refer to as internet. And internet relies on a physical infrastructure that allows networks and devices to connect to other networks and devices. Meaning that for us to have internet, okay, we need to have a physical infrastructure such as having cables, routers, hardwares, all connected together to become a network. Now, in contrast, www, which is World Wide Web, is not the same thing as internet. Okay, it is only a part of the internet that user can have access to by using the web browser. Now, what is www? www consists of massive collection of web pages. So just see it as a storage of different web page of a website. And for us to be able to have access to it, we need to use a web browser such as Chrome, Edge, Firefox. Now, this table summarizes the difference between the internet and www. For the internet, it is a worldwide collection of interconnected networks and devices, and it allows users to be able to send and receive emails, allow online chatting via text, audio and video. And it also makes use of transmission protocols and internet protocols. So these transmission protocols and internet protocols, they are a set of rules that must be followed when communication is taking place. While www is collection of multimedia web pages and other information on websites. So it uses HTTPS protocol, which are written in hypertext markup language. A www makes use of URL. Okay, so the URL, which is the address of a web page, is used to specify the location of a web page. Then the web resources are accessed by web browsers, meaning that for us to gain access to a web page, we need to have a web browser. And then it uses the internet to access information from websites. Now let's look at URL. So URL stands for Uniform Resource Locators. Basically, it is the address of a website or a web resource. And this URL is what you would usually type into a browser address bar, okay, in this format, meaning that every URL that you type would have a protocol, would have the website address, would have the path, would have the file name. Now let's look at what each item in the format means. So the protocol can either be the HTTP or the HTTPS, while www is the domain host. Then we have the domain name, which is the website name. For example, Facebook, Instagram. Then the domain type, it can be .com, .co, .org, .net, .gov, .net, and so on. And then sometimes a URL would have the country code, which you would see like .uk, .de, .cs, .my, and so on. Then the path is the web page. but is often omitted and it becomes the root directory of the website. Also, the file name, which refers to the actual resource, where such as the web page or the document. Now, this is an example of a URL. So we have HTTPS, then www dot, the website name, dot, the domain type, dot, the country code, slash, the path. Now let's look at web browser. So a web browser is a software that allows users to access and display web pages on their device screen. So when you go to a website, the website sends data to your computer. Now, when you go to a website, you would see text, you would see images, video, sound. Now, these are not what is actually in the background. What is actually in the background is hypertext markup language. Okay, so and this hypertext markup language has to be translated into what you can understand as a human. So the function of the web browser is to interpret or translate the HTML into a visual or readable format. And most browsers would have the following features. Okay, it should have the home page. It should be able to store the user's favorite websites. This we often refer to as bookmarks. It should be able to keep history of a website. They should have the ability to allow the user to navigate forward and backward, meaning that you should have that arrow that enables you to go forward and backward through the website that you have already opened. Then many web pages can be opened at the same time by using multiple tabs. Also, they make use of cookies. We'll look at the meaning of cookies in the next few slides. Also, they make use of hyperlinks, which allow navigation between websites and web pages. Now, let's look at HTTP and HTTPS. So, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And we say that it is a set of rules that must be obeyed when transferring web pages across the internet. So when some form of security such as SSL or TLS is used, then the HTTP changes to HTTPS. The letter S stands for secure, and this indicates that a more secure way of sending and receiving data across the internet. So HTTPS usually ensure that the data that is being transmitted is encrypted, the data cannot be easily intercepted, and sensitive information such as passwords is protected. That is why when you go to a website, you should always look out for HTTPS when you are entering a personal details on the internet. Now let's look at retrieval and location of web pages. So what happens when a user types in the URL address of a web page? So the first thing, this is the user computer and there's the web browser. So the user types in the URL site of the web address into the address bar. Now the web browser will ask the DNS server. So the DNS server, this is where we have the URL and corresponding IP address of website. So the browser will ask the DNS server for the IP address of the website. The DNS server will send the IP address of the website back to the computer. And then using this IP address, the computer now sets up a communication with the website server. So when it sets communication with the website server, it requests for the pages to be downloaded. So the HTML files are sent from the website server to the computer, and then the web browser will now interpret the HTML into what is now displayed to users. Okay, so that's when the user can now see the text, the sound, the videos, the images on a website. Okay, now let's look at cookies. So we said that cookies are small text files or code that is stored on a user computer, and they are sent by a web server to a browser on a user computer. So a cookies will store information such as users' preferences, users' login details, is able to customize the web page for each individual user, is able to store items in online shopping carts. So basically, cookies help websites to remember users and improve the browsing experience. Now let's look at the types of cookies. So there are two main types of cookies, which are session cookies and persistent, or we call it permanent cookie. So they differ based on how long they stay on your device. Now let's look at session cookies. So session cookies are called temporary cookies, and they are commonly used in online shopping to store items in a shopping cart. Now, what are the features of a session cookie? Number one, they store data temporarily in the memory. Also, they do not actually collect personal data of a user. They do not. And they cannot identify the user. And this is because session cookies cease to exist on a user computer once the browser is closed or the session ends. It deletes the data automatically. Persistent cookie. So the persistent cookies are stored on the hard drive of a user, and they are only stored there until the expiring date is reached or the user deletes the data. So a persistent cookies are permanent cookies, meaning that it will not be deleted on your computer even when the session ends. And persistent cookies remembers user login details. So these cookies remain in operation on the user's computer even after the browser is closed or the website session is terminated. And the advantage is convenience, meaning that you don't need to log in every time, because these cookies can remember the login details every time you want to have access to that website. So persistent cookies are very efficient way of carrying data from one website session to another session, or even between sessions on related websites. So that's all for this topic. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe.